On the freezing cold night of December 31st, 1998, the finance ministers of Europe were drunk on champagne and delusion. In the glass towers of Frankfurt and the marble palaces of Brussels, they believed they were making history. They thought they were about to do what Napoleon and Charlemagne could not. They were going to unite Europe, not with cannons, not with treaties, but with a ledger. When the clock struck midnight and the calendar flipped to January 1st, 1999, 11 nations committed financial suicide. France surrendered the franc. Germany buried the mark. Italy abandoned the lira. Spain killed the peseta. In their place came a ghost, a digital phantom called the euro. The politicians told us this was progress. They said it would bring peace and prosperity. They promised a united superpower. They were lying. What they built that night was not a cathedral of unity. It was a financial doomsday machine. We are told that the euro was about brotherhood. We are told it was about ending war. We are told it was the natural evolution of the European project. That is the illusion. The truth is written in the ledger. January 1st, 1999 was the day 19 different economies were locked inside a cage. They were chained together with different productivity levels, different cultures, different debts. And then the architects threw away the key. This is not a story about politics. This is a story about insolvency. This is a story about what happens when nations give up the one tool that keeps them alive. Their printing press, their sovereignty, their ability to survive economic reality. To understand the trap, you must understand what money actually is. For a sovereign nation, currency is not just paper. It is not just a way to buy bread. It is a shock absorber. It is a release valve. It is the difference between survival and bankruptcy. When a country becomes uncompetitive, when wages get too high, when debts pile up, it has a weapon: devaluation. Look at Italy before the euro. Italy was an industrial giant. They made cars. They made fashion. They made machinery that the world wanted. But Italy had problems. Inflation was high. Government spending was out of control. The debt was massive. In any rigid system, Italy should have collapsed in the 1970s. But Italy had the lira, and the Bank of Italy had a printing press. When Italian exports became too expensive, when German buyers stopped coming, the solution was simple: print more lira. The currency would fall. Overnight, Italian goods became 20% cheaper. Factories stayed open. Workers kept their jobs. Exports boomed. It was dirty. It was inflationary. But it worked. It allowed Italy to remain competitive, despite political chaos. On January 1st, 1999, Italy handed that printing press to a landlord in Germany. The European Central Bank was born in Frankfurt. Its mandate was not to help Italy. Its mandate was not to protect jobs in Spain. Its mandate was to fight inflation. It was built in the image of the German Bundesbank. The Germans had a cultural trauma. In the 1920s, a wheelbarrow of marks could not buy a loaf of bread. Hyperinflation had destroyed the middle class. It had prepared the soil for fascism. So the Germans demanded that the euro be hard as steel. It must never be devalued. It must never be printed recklessly. This was the hidden trap. By joining the euro, countries like Italy, Spain, Greece, and Portugal gave up their only defense. They became homeowners who took out massive mortgages but handed the bank account to their neighbor. They became prisoners who built their own cells. As long as the economy was growing, nobody noticed the change. In fact, the first decade felt like paradise. It felt like free money. This was the bait. Before the euro, if Greece wanted to borrow money, investors demanded high interest rates. Maybe 15%, maybe 20%. Why? Because the drachma was risky. Greece might print money. Greece might default. The high interest rate was a speed limit. It prevented reckless borrowing. But on January 1st, 1999, the markets looked at Greece differently. They no longer saw the drachma, they saw the euro. They saw the signature of Germany. Suddenly, banks in New York and London and Paris started lending to Greece at German interest rates. Greek borrowing costs collapsed from 18% to 3%. It was a credit card with no limit. It was a lottery ticket that never stopped paying. The southern nations went insane. Greece doubled public sector salaries. They let people retire at 50 with full pensions. They bought submarines and tanks they did not need. Spain poured concrete over the entire Mediterranean coast. They built airports where no planes landed. They built highways to nowhere. Ireland constructed housing estates for ghosts. The politicians in the South were hailed as geniuses. They were delivering first-world lifestyles on third-world budgets. The voters loved them. No one asked where the money came from. No one asked what would happen when the bill arrived. They believed the lie that the euro had magically made Greece as productive as Germany. But while the South was partying, Germany was working. This is the second part of the trap. The euro was poison for the South, but it was rocket fuel for Germany. Before the euro, every time Germany succeeded, the mark would rise in value. A strong mark made Mercedes and BMW more expensive for foreigners. It was a natural break on German dominance. It gave other countries room to compete. But with the euro, that break was cut. Germany was now tied to the weak economies of the South. The dysfunction of Greece and Italy acted as an anchor. It kept the euro weaker than the mark would have been on its own. This meant German exports were artificially cheap. Germany began to run massive trade surpluses. They exported cars and machines to the very countries borrowing the cheap money. It was a perfect loop. German banks lent money to Greek consumers. Greek consumers bought German cars. The money left Frankfurt, touched Athens, and came right back to Frankfurt. Germany was financing its own customers. The German economy exploded while the industrial base of France and Italy was gutted. They could not compete with the efficient German machine, and they could no longer devalue to compensate. The factories in Milan began to close. The textile mills in Portugal went silent. The shipyards in Greece rusted. The euro was supposed to bring convergence. Instead, it created a canyon. The North got richer and more efficient. The South got poorer and debt-ridden. The elastic band holding Europe together was stretching to the breaking point, but the bureaucrats in Brussels refused to see it. They were blinded by ideology. They pointed to low inflation and stable exchange rates. They congratulated themselves. They expanded the Eurozone. More countries walked into the trap. They ignored economists who warned that you cannot have one currency without one government. They ignored the history of the gold standard, which had caused the Great Depression. They believed political will could overcome mathematics. They were wrong. Then came 2008. The global financial crisis exploded on Wall Street. The shock wave rolled across the Atlantic. At first, Eurozone leaders were smug. They called it an Anglo-Saxon crisis. They blamed greedy American bankers. They were delusional. The crisis ripped away the curtain. It revealed the truth that had been hidden since January 1st, 1999. When credit markets froze, investors suddenly woke up. They looked at the debt piles in Greece and Italy and Spain. They realized something terrifying. There was no German guarantee. The German taxpayer had never agreed to pay Greek debts. The euro was not a unified currency. It was a stack of national debts wearing a single mask. The sudden stop began. This is the nightmare scenario for any debtor. For 10 years, money had flowed from north to south like a river. Now the river ran dry. Banks stopped lending. They demanded repayment, but the money was gone. It had been spent on concrete and pensions and imported cars. In a normal country with its own currency, this is the moment the safety valve pops. The currency crashes. The debt inflates away. The economy takes a hit, but survives. But Greece, Italy, Spain, and Portugal did not have their own currency. They were trapped in a burning building. The doors were locked from the outside. They could not print money to pay doctors and soldiers. They could not devalue to boost exports. The only option left was something called internal devaluation. This is an academic term for a brutal reality. If you cannot lower the value of your currency, you must lower the value of your people. You must slash wages. You must fire workers. You must cut pensions. You must destroy living standards until your population is so poor they become competitive again. Think about that. The solution to the crisis was to make people poorer, to engineer a depression, to break the social contract. That was the only tool left inside the trap. In late 2009, the new Greek government revealed that the previous administration had been lying. The deficit was not 3%, it was 15%. The markets panicked. Interest rates on Greek debt skyrocketed. Greece was insolvent. On January 1st, 1999, Greece had celebrated joining the club of rich nations. 10 years later, they were occupied by a new army. Not soldiers, accountants. They were called the Troika, the European Commission, the European Central Bank, the International Monetary Fund. These three unelected bodies seized control of the Greek economy. They dictated the laws, they rewrote the budget. They told the Greek parliament what to do. The Troika did not care about the suffering of Greek families. Their priority was to save the euro, or more accurately, to save the French and German banks that had lent billions to Greece. If Greece defaulted, the big banks in Paris and Frankfurt would take massive losses. They might collapse. The politicians in Berlin and Paris could not allow that, so they engineered a bailout. They gave billions of euros to the Greek government, but not 1 cent went to the Greek people. The money flowed through Athens and straight back to the creditors. It was a money laundering operation. It saved northern banks while pretending to help the southern nation. In exchange for this unpayable loan, the Troika demanded savage austerity. They demanded the minimum wage be slashed. They demanded hospitals run out of medicine. They demanded schools turn off heating in winter. The suicide rate in Greece soared. People searched garbage bins for food in the shadow of the Acropolis. Youth unemployment hit 50%. An entire generation was thrown on the scrap heap. And through it all, the trap of January 1st, 1999 held firm. The Greek people voted in referendum after referendum against austerity. They rioted in Syntagma Square. They burned the flag of the European Union. It did not matter. The trap was mathematical. As long as they stayed in the euro, they had no sovereignty. Their democracy was an illusion. The real power lay in Frankfurt with unelected technocrats who controlled the liquidity of the banking system. The European Central Bank was the ultimate enforcer. When the Greek government tried to resist the creditors, the ECB threatened to cut off liquidity to Greek banks. They threatened to shut down the ATMs. They weaponized the money supply against a member nation. It was a brutal display of power. It proved that in the Eurozone, democracy is secondary to financial stability. The tragedy of the euro is not just economic. It is the betrayal of the European dream. The project meant to unite the continent has revived the oldest hatreds. Germans look at the South and see lazy moochers stealing their tax money. Greeks and Italians look at the North and see cruel overlords turning them into debt colonies. The stereotypes of World War II have been dusted off. The wounds have reopened, and the trap is still there. The crisis of 2010 was never solved. It was papered over with more debt and more printing. The structural flaw remains. You cannot have one monetary policy for such different economies. You cannot lock a Ferrari and a tractor together and expect them to drive at the same speed. To understand how deep the trap goes, you need to know about Target 2. This is the internal payment system of the Eurozone. Almost no one talks about it because it is too complex and too terrifying. When a Greek citizen buys a German car, money must move from the Greek central bank to the German Bundesbank. In a normal system, this would be settled with gold or foreign reserves. But in the magical world of the euro, no settlement is required. The Greek central bank issues an IOU. The German central bank accepts a claim on the system. For years, as the South imported German goods and as capital fled to the safe North, these imbalances grew. The German Bundesbank built up a credit claim of over 1 trillion euros against the rest of the system. Italy and Spain built up massive debts. This is the hidden chain that binds them. If Italy left the euro today and returned to the lira, it would technically owe hundreds of billions to Germany. It is a financial suicide vest strapped to the entire continent. If one country pulls the trigger, everyone blows up. This explains why European leaders fought so hard to keep Greece in. It was not about Greece. If Greece left and defaulted on its Target 2 liabilities, the German taxpayer would realize that 1 trillion euros of their wealth was imaginary. It was just numbers on a computer screen in Frankfurt. The trap of January 1st, 1999 was designed to be irreversible. The architects burned the bridges. As the crisis dragged from 2010 to 2012, the social fabric tore. In Italy, the technocratic government of Mario Monti was installed by a coup orchestrated by Brussels. The elected leader, Silvio Berlusconi, was forced out, not by voters, by bond markets. The yield on Italian debt spiked. The European Central Bank sent a secret letter to Rome demanding reforms. It was stark proof that national sovereignty was dead. The Prime Minister of Italy answered to Frankfurt, not to Italians. In Spain, youth unemployment hit 55%. An entire generation of architects, engineers, and doctors packed their bags. They moved to London, Berlin, and Amsterdam. They served coffee in northern cities to citizens of the creditor nations. It was a massive brain drain. The South exported its most valuable resource, its human capital. This deepened the divergence. The South got older and poorer. The North got an influx of cheap, skilled labor. The euro functioned as a pump sucking lifeblood from the Mediterranean. The political backlash was inevitable. The rise of populist parties across Europe traces directly to the euro's flaw. In Greece, the radical left party Syriza came to power, promising to tear up the memorandum. Their finance minister, Yanis Varoufakis, tried to negotiate with the creditors. He used logic. He used game theory. He explained that a bankrupt nation cannot repay debts by shrinking its economy. He argued austerity was self-defeating, but he was talking to a wall. The German finance minister Wolfgang Schäuble was not interested in economics. He was interested in morality. In the German worldview, debt is sin. The German word for debt, Schuld, is the same as guilt. Schäuble believed the Greeks had sinned by overspending. Now they had to do penance. The logic of the ledger was replaced by the logic of the pulpit. The euro had become a morality play where Southern suffering was seen as redemption. In July 2015, the Greek drama peaked. The Greek people voted in a massive referendum to reject the bailout terms. It was a resounding oxy. No, it was a cry of defiance against technocrats. But within 24 hours, Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras capitulated. He realized the European Central Bank was ready to collapse the Greek banking system completely. He looked into the abyss. He blinked. He signed a surrender document harsher than the one the people had rejected. This was the moment the world saw the truth. The European Union was not a democracy. It was a benevolent dictatorship of the banks. The vote of the people was irrelevant if it conflicted with euro rules. The trap was absolute. Defenders of the euro claim it was saved in 2012, and they point to one moment, Mario Draghi's famous speech in London. With the euro on the brink, the ECB president declared it would do whatever it takes to preserve the currency. Markets believed him. What he really promised was unlimited money printing to buy failing government debt, turning the ECB into a lender of last resort, something Germany had long opposed. Panic faded, interest rates collapsed, and the euro survived. But survival came at a price. To keep Southern Europe afloat, interest rates were pushed to zero, then below zero. Cheap money flooded the system, inflating real estate and stock bubbles, while wages stagnated. Wealth rose at the top, but the working class gained little. Zombie companies were kept alive, blocking the creative destruction that drives real growth. And the core problem never disappeared. Italy's economy has barely grown in 20 years. Its debt keeps rising, its industry keeps shrinking. This is not sudden collapse, but slow decline. Southern Europe drifts toward dependency, while resentment grows in the north. A system that creates permanent winners and permanent losers cannot last. Fear of collapse keeps it together, for now. History shows currency unions without political unions eventually break. The euro postponed reality. It did not defeat it.